Hello, welcome back to Mad Times with Madison. Something very cool about the episode that I'm doing right now is I had already recorded 3/4 of it out loud today. And then Harvey jumped on the outlet where like my extension cord is plugged in, so like all of my equipment can be plugged in. And she turned it off. And it doesn't save if you like your machine malfunctions in the middle, which is odd to me. Feels like perhaps that should be like a safety precaution, but no. Anyway, so that's lovely. So I've already actually done this today. And she's just over there acting like she didn't do anything wrong. Which is fine because I actually messed up the beginning and I kept calling the Adam Walsh episode a Patreon episode, even though it's not. It was a full episode and it didn't actually do a bonus episode, which I do apologize for because my ear hurt. But by the time you're listening to this on Wednesday, I hope I had one out for you on Monday. That's like my present goal Sunday morning right now, which I would have had plenty of time for to record before I have to go do all of my stuff, before I have to go to Target and TJ Maxx and Costco, Bath and Body Works. If you go to those places, you obviously have to go to Chili's because it's right there. And who doesn't want to go to Chili's? So I am booked and busy today. So thank you for that, Harvey. So yeah, Adam Walsh, not a Patreon episode, obviously. So I told you in that episode, I was going to do a case related to that, or however I worded it. I have no idea anymore. I think I have early onset dementia or something. I can't remember anything. I'm doing that case today. I thought I was going to do it for the Patreon on Friday when I didn't end up doing one, but it was just like a little too long to make a Patreon episode. So I am doing the case of Henry Lee Lucas and Ottis Toole. I will say most of this is Henry Lee Lucas. He was like the main crime that Ottis Toole did was Adam Walsh, which I already did. That was like his big crime. So I am doing technically both of them, but it's going to mostly be Henry Lee Lucas. This is a gruesome twosome if I've ever heard of one. These are two they are classified as serial killers. They are just, if you picture like a gruesome twosome, like two disgusting looking dudes, it's these. So Ottis Elwood Toole, which Elwood is a family name in my family, so it was unnerving to read. I don't quite like that. It's odd to see it out in the wild because it's such a weird name, but then to see it in this context, just like, oh, I don't really care for that. He was born on March 5th, 1947, to an awful home life in Jacksonville, Florida, according to multiple sources, because this all just seemed so ridiculous. And not just like this part. He lived with his mother because his father was an alcoholic and abandoned them. His mother, or his sister, I read, either way, dressed him up as a girl, which we know happened with Ed Kemper. If you are not familiar with Ed Kemper, that is one of the first episodes being Taryn did under Almost. Like, you can't listen to it at all anymore unless you're a Patreon, and I'm not even sure if it's still up there. So if you would like to know, I have been considering redoing my older episodes, like the first batch of episodes that we did, just because the audio wasn't very good and because I'm much better at what I do now. So if you are interested in hearing about Ed Kemper, or if you remember any of the super early ones that we did that you wouldn't mind a fresh take on, let me know, because I have been considering doing that, but I don't want the people who have been here for us for a while to feel like I'm cheating them out of episodes by doing something they had already heard of. So let me know about that. So they dressed him up as a girl. He was also molested by his older sister and neighbor as a child. Also, allegedly, his grandmother was a Satanist, and he would accompany her to graveyards and watch her dig up body parts for rituals. Now, like I said, this just all seems ridiculous. I could not believe this to be true. I read it on Wikipedia, which we all know. I do use Wikipedia as like a jumping off point for sources. It's basically like someone else did a book report and they gave you their bibliography. That's what Wikipedia is. If you see a section of things that looks interesting, there is always a link to take you back to where they read it from. And then you can decide whether or not it's good or not. This happened to me here. I read it on Wikipedia. I was like, this probably is not true. None of this is probably true. But I did look up my own set of sources. I started Googling and reading like a handful, and like all of this stuff was in there. But I do believe this information comes from him, and he is a known liar. The lying is a large part of this case, honestly. So is it true? I don't know, but it is like recorded as a source. I'm pretty sure that he did talk about this. So by the time Ottis Toole meets Henry Lee Lucas, he is already a murderer. So if you're thinking that they like linked up and started being murderers together, that is not the case. He's already a documented murderer. A traveling salesman had picked him up for sex once they were in the woods. Toole ran him over with his own car, which, whatever. He was also a suspect of a couple of other murders during this time, and he was briefly married for 3 wonderful days before his wife said, actually, what the fuck was I thinking? Absolutely not. Goodbye. Henry Lee Lucas was born on August 23rd, 1936 in Virginia, also to just not a great family. He had 9 siblings. Both of his parents were alcoholics. His mother was a sex worker to make money, which, nothing wrong with that. He just didn't like it. So that was like a personal toll on him, not saying that made his family terrible. As a teenager, it was said that Lucas had sexual relations with his half-brother and also dead animals. Now remember, these two are giant liars, so I'm going to keep reminding you every time I say something that sounds a little ridiculous that these two are known to lie. So Lucas also claimed his mother used to make him watch her and her clients together, which now that's not right. That is sexual abuse. That's not something you can't force someone to do that, especially your child. That is depraved and disgusting. He also claimed his mother and sister would dress him up like a girl, which Toole also claimed, like what happened to Ed Kemper. So that's interesting. He also claimed to have had head trauma from when his mom hit him in the head with a wooden board when he was like 5. He claimed it knocked him out for 3 days. Other people said 24 hours. Other people said 11 hours. So, like I said, he'd just be making stuff up. He also had one glass eye from like a few different accidents. Like he had got hit in the eye, then it developed an infection and blah, 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 blah. So he did end up losing an eye and he had a glass eye. So he was also just like not thriving in school socially. Nobody wants to talk to the weird kid with glass eye. I'm sorry, it does sound mean, but I have said it 100 times. Kids are mean. You just can't. It is what it is. So he had so much rage at his family. He hated his mother. He hated that she was a sex worker, that he had like all these problems. He had then started molesting his brother and torturing animals, which is just like the cleanest segue into being a serial killer. That's what they all say it 100 times. Every serial killer we've ever done, there's head trauma, they're torturing animals. Perhaps most of the times there's some sexual abuse either by or to these people. And they are classified as serial killers. If you have never heard of these men before, they are serial killers. So by the time they meet, I said Ottis Toole was already a murderer. Well, so was Lucas. In March of 1960, he was sentenced to 20 to 40 years in prison for murdering his mother. He said they were arguing, maybe over a girl he had wanted to marry. He said he remembered shoving her and her having like a heart attack. They were both drunk at the time. And then when the police actually showed up to the crime scene, it was found that Lucas actually stabbed her in the neck. Like, brutally stabbed her in the neck. She was 74 at the time. He was sent to Jackson State Penitentiary in South Michigan, but after 2 attempted suicides, he was admitted to Ionia State Mental Hospital. He was paroled in 1970 after serving 10 years, which is wild to like a convicted murderer. 10 years, that's insanity. And they will have come to regret that. It was also said before he murdered his mother, he could have possibly murdered a 15-year-old girl so that he could have sex with her. He then was arrested several times for other various things before he murdered his mother. But then, as soon as he got released after murdering his mother, he got 3.5 more years for trying to kidnap 2 girls, like immediately. This is immediate. Once he was out from that, he moved to Pennsylvania. I think he moved in with his sister, maybe, something like that. Oh, no. I think he moved in with his sister before he murdered his mother. Whatever. He's just drifting around. He got married briefly in 1975, but abandoned his wife when she accused him of molesting her daughters. There is no more information on that. I'm sure that woman faded into obscurity by choice after all of this came out. So Toole meets Henry Lee Lucas at a soup kitchen in 1976, and they instantly become lovers, which is just kind of a twist I did not see coming. So they link up, and Lucas claimed to have retaught Ottis how to murder and how to commit crimes because he was just, like, very bad at it. They said, like, he would just constantly leave evidence behind, like, huge pieces of evidence. So he claims he was the one who sort of, like, retaught him how to commit crimes. Henry Lee Lucas and Ottis Toole traveled across 26 states in the 1970s, killing wherever they went. They preyed upon anyone they could find, hitchhikers, sex workers, anyone who sort of seemed like, not that they needed help, but, you know, just like people drifting around. Also, people like them, they took advantage of and then murdered. For a while, Toole's orphaned niece and nephew, Frank and Becky Powell, came with them. I have no more information about Frank. I don't know what happened to him. I don't know if he stayed with them long. I don't know if he was there at all because they are liars, like I said. And a lot of this is about Becky Powell. It's like a large part of this case. So he may have like just not gotten a lot of attention because of what happens to Becky, but I have no information on Frank. So if you keep thinking, I wonder what happened to Frank, I wonder why she didn't say anything, the answer is because I have literally no idea. Ow, my ear hurts. Okay, I'm wearing one headphone. It sounds very like I'm wearing my over-the-ear headphones on one ear because my ear hurts and it sounds disorienting, but I do kind of feel like a DJ, so that is kind of cool and fun. Moving on. Like I said, Frank and Becky come with them. Well, Lucas had started having sex with Becky when she was only 12. And I had read that she was, like, intellectually disabled, which at this time in, like, the 70s, I don't really know the extent of what that means. But she was, like, classified as intellectually disabled. She seemed willing to do anything to be with him, and he later said he grew to love her. He liked that she seemed to accept everything he said. So he needs like a yes man in his corner. He needs someone who was like obsessed with him. And I mean, she's fucking 12 years old. In 1981, Toole's mother died, and he started hitting the drugs and alcohol pretty hard. And if you are caught up on the regular episodes, because Adam Walsh was a regular episode, contrary to what my brain convinced me for the past half hour, you know that 1981 is the year that Adam Walsh was found murdered. So that sort of lines up with that happening. He sort of like lost whatever little of his mind that he had left at that time. Eventually, the gruesome twosome split up around 1982, and Lucas took Becky with him because he wanted her all to himself. This angered Toole. Obviously, that's his niece, and that was allegedly the reason behind like the crime spree that he went on after this. Because, like I said, a lot of this is going to be about Henry Lee Lucas because they were serial killers, but it's hard to get it. They did so many, it's impossible to even talk about. So Ottis's big murder was Adam Walsh, which I already did, so I'm not going to redo it in here for you today. So it sort of focuses on Henry Lee Lucas's big murders. So he takes Toole's niece. Toole goes on this next crime spree that he does. So Lucas and Becky ride off in the sunset together. So they try and stay at this lady, Kate Rich's house. But the people there were not big fans of them. I can't imagine why. So they left to stay at this place called the Hands of Prayer. It was like a commune of sorts run by a man named Reuben Moore. They told him they were a married couple. So Reuben let them stay in one of the trailers on the property and had Lucas help out with odd jobs. He's like, of course you could stay here, but like you need to work. You need to like do the work. Well, not long after they get there, Becky doesn't like it, and she wants to leave. She wants to, like, go back and be with her family. She doesn't want to be there. But he doesn't want to lose her because he doesn't want to leave. He, like, has nowhere to go. He's, like, a convicted mass murderer. Well, perhaps not mass murderer at this time, and nobody really has any idea. But, like, he has committed several crimes. He, like, really doesn't want to be floating around and going and hanging out with Becky's family. So he doesn't want to let her leave because he doesn't want to lose her. The account of what happened next came from Lucas himself. So take it with a grain of salt, however you will, whatever. He said that on August 24th, 1982, after listening to Becky complain relentlessly, he tells her to get ready and they'll leave. He's like, just get your shit together. Get in the truck. Whatever. Okay, just kidding. They don't get in the truck. He doesn't want to take the truck because he has a warrant out. And he stole that truck and he ripped the license plate off. So he's like, it's going to look a little suspicious. Like, don't want to draw any more attention to me than I have to. So he's like, we need to hitchhike because of all of that. So they make it near Dallas, which something I learned from having family in different parts of Texas is that Texas is gigantic. Now, these two didn't make it very far. They only made it about 2 hours away from the commune. But you can for real be driving in Texas for like 5 hours and still be in the state of Texas, which is just insanity to me. So anyway, they make it about 2 hours. Lucas stops for a 6-pack of beer and continues to try and convince Becky that this is like a terrible idea and they should just go back to the commune. Like, they have somewhere to stay. They had not a terrible gig there, so they should go back to that while they can. She argued with him. She very much does not want to be there. But she said he did not like when she started arguing with him because it reminded him of his mother. And then to top it all off, she ended up slapping him, which he just instantly saw red. There was no coming back from that. And I'm not even sure if he had any intention of taking Becky anywhere else, honestly. So this was probably going to happen anyway because she really wanted to go home. I just don't think he had any intention of letting her get what she wanted. So she slaps him, and then he retaliates by immediately killing her with a meat carving knife by shoving it right in her chest, which he also stabbed his mother to death. So that does seem plausible. It seems believable. He was angry. He later said that she just would not take responsibility for herself, which I'm not sure what that is supposed to mean because at this point she's like 15 years old, and she had been essentially kidnapped from her uncle, who also was a great person. Like, you need to leave Becky alone, honestly. He was horrified how quickly she died. He said that she was gone before I knew it, which you stabbed her in the chest with a meat carving knife. Like, you should perhaps use your context clues to your actions. So then, right there next to the highway, on the blanket, Becky had laid out for them to get some sleep before moving on to, like, the next hitchhiker. He had sex with her corpse and said it was the best sex he had ever had with her. He then decapitated her, dismembered her, and scattered her in the field. He left her purse and suitcase behind and then hitchhiked back to the commune and told everyone that Becky got in a truck with someone else and left him. So about 3 weeks later, on September 16th, he, for some reason, kills again. A reason that, like, just doesn't make any sense. Not that any of these made any sense, but he went all the way back to Kate Rich's house, who him and Becky had lived with for a brief period of time. He asked Kate if she would want to go help him look for Becky. She said sure. She wouldn't mind getting out of the house, honestly. However, immediately we know something is up because he very clearly knows where Becky is, obviously. So he drives for about an hour with Kate, and then he just takes the butcher knife he had stashed, like, in the middle of them and stabs her in the side with it. And then when he goes to get her out of the car on the passenger side, so he, like, gets out of the car, walks around, goes to get her out of her door, she's already dead. He, like, stabbed her directly in the heart. I'm not sure if that was his intention. It kind of didn't sound like he meant to immediately kill her, but that's what happened. He said he was very aroused when he saw that Kate was dead. He then had sex with her corpse. He dragged her to a large drainage pipe near the road. He shoved both the corpse and the clothing into it as far as he could until he felt certain no one would find her. He then decided to leave the commune for good this time. Probably for the best. He has murdered, like, 2 members of this commune. He made it to California and then drifted around for about a month until he decided to return back to Kate's body because he learned he was a suspect in her disappearance. He took her body out of the drainage pipe and put them in a stove at the commune to incinerate them, like the pieces. He then passed a polygraph test about her disappearance. If you're thinking, like, perhaps he passed the test because he was just lying about the whole thing, so, like, there was really no stake in the game for him. Eventually, when he confessed, the police found her glasses in the drainage pipe and ashes in the wood-burning stove that looked like they belonged to human remains, so it is more than likely that he actually did do this, which just goes to show you polygraph tests are completely unreliable. So, in July of 1983, Henry Lee Lucas was arrested for possession of a firearm, which he is not allowed to have because he is obviously a felon. The police, however, were relieved to have him in prison no matter how small the charge, because they just really wanted to talk about the disappearance of Kate Rich and Becky Powell. They're like, we don't care. We just want. He was the last person to be with these two girls who have been missing since then. We just want to talk to him about that. So he did not love being in jail because he couldn't drink coffee or smoke cigarettes, which felt. So he admitted to his cellmate, Don, that he had done bad things and he had been killing for the past 10 years and he had attempted to get help several times and just nobody would help him. Woe is me type of situation. After admitting that he had killed, Lucas was charged with the murders of 82-year-old Kate Rich and 15-year-old Becky Powell. Becky Powell's real name might be Frida. If you ever read about this case and you see Frida Powell, that might be her real name. Becky might be her nickname. It was kind of confusing. Everywhere says Becky, but one of the sources did have her listed as Frida and then quotations Becky, that was her nickname. So if you ever look this up, if you perhaps see Frida Powell, that's Becky Powell. So he gave the authorities plenty of evidence, including the decomposed pieces of Becky, where she was in that field. And at his June 21st arraignment in the Montague County courtroom, Lucas stated that he had stabbed Kate Rich to death, but then he went on waiving his right to an attorney. He went on to tell everyone he had sex with the body, that he cut it into pieces and burned it in a wood stove behind his cabin. He's giving all of this information. He told a courtroom full of cops and reporters that he had killed Kate Rich and at least 100 more people. So the courtroom was like, what the fuck? They thought they were finally getting the answers to these two missing women that they were certain he had something to do with. And then this dude is like, well, yeah, I did those, but I also did upwards of 100 more. They're getting way more than they bargained for. This, if you're wondering, is the exact spot that Harvey jumped on to my extension cord and shut it off. This is how far I got. I had already done this part today. If you're wondering why it sounded so clean and then this next part might be kind of clunky, it's because I've literally already read it this morning. And now she's just sitting over there in her cat tower acting like a complete angel. And now we're enemies for the day. So after all of this happened, Lucas wrote Ottis Toole a letter to tell him about Becky and just sort of let him know, he's spilling the beans fully if you want to help him remember some of their crimes together. He's like, it's no big deal if you don't want to get involved. I'll leave that up to you. But if you could refresh my memory on some of the things we did. I haven't mentioned it to the police yet, which is a lie. He definitely had already mentioned Toole to the police, just straight lying. So Ottis Toole received that letter in prison. On January 4th, 1982, Toole barricaded 65-year-old George Sonnenberg in a boarding house where he was living in Jacksonville and set the house on fire. Sonnenberg died a week later of injuries he sustained in the fire. In April 1983, Toole was arrested for an unrelated arson incident in Jacksonville. Toole confessed to the crime and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Toole signed a confession stating that he and Sonnenberg had begun a sexual relationship, and after the two had an argument, he set his home on fire. So Toole receives this letter, and he's like, no, actually, this has nothing to do with me. I didn't do that. Goodbye. No, please leave me out of it. And then for some reason, he does slowly start to back up all of Lucas's claims and confess that he had helped Lucas commit over 100 murders. So the two were allowed to talk on the phone. It would be their first contact with each other in 2 years. They were just talking, chit-chatting, perhaps reminiscing longingly and bragging about all of the murders that they committed. Toole also tried to goad Lucas into admitting to cannibalism because they do eventually say that they were cannibals. So Toole's just trying to get him to say that, and he doesn't want to be the one to say it. So he was quoted in taped conversations saying things like, remember one time I said I wanted some ribs. Did that make me a cannibal? He indicated that they both had filleted some meat from the bodies and mentioned that he had poured out some of the blood so he can see what the victim tasted like. Lucas responded, "I've seen bodies cut up worse than you've ever seen bodies cut up." Lucas did say that he did not like the taste of barbecue sauce, so he wasn't really into it, because I think that Toole had put a bunch of barbecue sauce on. That's just so disgusting. He was like, yeah, I didn't like barbecue sauce, so I wasn't really that into it. Nothing to do with the fact that it was human remains. It was the barbecue sauce that actually made it disgusting. The two got off the phone, and the police said that even though they had been heavily discussing their murders and things like that, it just made it more unbelievable because of how not serious they seemed to take it, and the volume of things they were saying, cannibalism. They're just talking about murdering all these people with no regard. So it actually, to the police, is they might be making this entire thing up. Actually, we might have nothing. We started out with 2, went to a couple hundred, and now I'm not at all confident that any of this is real. However, Toole was given the death sentence after it was concluded that the house fire he started deliberately had ended up killing someone. But that sentence and another one for an old lady that he had murdered for no reason were commuted to life in prison. His death sentences were commuted. So after Thanksgiving in 1983, a task force really started to look into the hundreds of murders these two had confessed to. They did a long one-day interview with him where Texas Rangers could question him about all of their open cases to see if he was involved in any of them, because he had claimed to commit over 125 murders. So, of course, these Rangers are hoping some of these murders are cold cases that are sitting on their desk that they can't solve. They're like, well, hopefully we can get these families some closure. Hopefully, not that anyone wants it to happen, but hopefully these men are involved in it and we can finally get some answers. Then, for 3 days, in January of 1984, 107 officers from 18 states and the District of Columbia filed the Holodome in Monroe, Louisiana, for a second conference about the homicides allegedly committed by Henry Lee Lucas. So he's getting a ton of attention. He's basically having a panel, and people are just coming up to him did you commit this murder? It's actual insanity. He was going to be allowed to book interviews by phone or in person until his murder trial for a separate murder from Katie and Becky. So there is a third murder that he is actually going to go on trial for. So he's allowed to do all of this stuff in the meantime. The Rangers urged police officers not to give Lucas too many details or photographs because they wanted to be certain that he was involved in the cases that he claimed to be. They're like, don't feed him information that he can repeat back to us. Keep it minimal. We need to keep some things to ourselves so we know if it's true or not. Lucas did appear to close cases and accurately lead investigators to crime scenes. He knew details about murders to which he confessed that had not been published in the press. He stated, I had no feelings for the people themselves or any of the crimes. I'd pick them up hitchhiking, running, and playing, stuff like that. We'd get to going and having a good time. First thing you know, I'd killed her and thrown her out somewhere. No remorse. He would also go on to say that a live woman ain't nothing to him. And he would just offer up information when he heard where a police officer was from. This man does not care. So someone would come up to him and be like, hey, this is Officer so-and-so from this city in Texas. He'd be like, oh yeah, I have some bodies in your area for you, actually. I did do some of those. Just whatever. Just insane. It seemed that being in prison suited him just fine, especially because he was treated well and probably had better food and shelter than he was used to. He did all he could to cooperate, and the officers generally found him congenial. He was a fine person to get along with. He did not seem at all worried that he would get the death penalty. Just a very bizarre happening. He was just very chill about the whole thing. Very nonchalant about the hundreds of murders he's confessing to. I don't know if I put it in here, but I know I'm keep saying 100, 125, but eventually they confessed 600 murders. So Lucas was arraigned for what was called the Orange Socks murder on August 2nd, 1983, but in a surprise turnaround on August 12th claimed that he was not guilty of Becky Powell's murder despite his initial statements. At the end of September, he waived his right to a trial for the murder of Kate Rich and pled guilty, receiving a sentence of 75 years. The following month, his attorney asked the judge to consider throwing out Lucas's written and videotaped statements about his murder of Becky Powell. On the tape, Lucas was shown calmly describing how he had killed her, dismembered her, and had sexual contact with the corpse. So the judge decided, well, no, that will probably be admissible in court. That seems pertinent information to what we're speaking of. In addition, the option of pleading not guilty by reason of insanity was denied to him, which is big. So Lucas went on trial for Becky's murder after that. His attorney was Tom Whitlock, who argued that Lucas had not intended to kill Becky. On the stand, a tearful Lucas admitted to Becky's murder, but said he didn't know quite how it had happened, and he was full of remorse over it. Then, after he was convicted and received a life sentence, obviously, he congratulated the prosecutor and told him he did a great job. Lucas then issued a statement to the effect that he had not tried to win because he didn't want to, which he had previously been bragging to the police that he could get away with whatever he wanted. So he's like, well, I didn't get out of this because I didn't want to, so So in March of 1984, Lucas is put on trial for the Orange Socks murder. District Attorney Ed Walsh was the chief prosecutor, while Don Higginbottom and Parker McAuliffe defended Lucas. The case was to be heard before Judge John Carter. So the trial begins with Lucas's confession of how he murdered this girl who, when she was found, she was only wearing orange socks, which is why it's called the Orange Socks murder. They showed a video of him talking to the investigators about what happened. He explained he picked up this woman as a hitchhiker, took part in his usual MO. He had sex with her, murdered her, and then had sex with her again. He then dumped her body, and then a video was played showing him the police where he put her body. However, the defense got the unedited video because the prosecution basically showed like a highlight reel of information. They had like pieced together all of the pertinent things he was saying. Well, the unedited video showed Lucas being able not to recall certain things. It showed him contradicting himself. It showed the sheriff helping him recall certain details, which is what we call in the biz a coerced confession. You can't ask leading questions or feed information that leads to a confession. It's just not a thing. It's not an actual confession if you're giving them what you want them to say. Brenda Dassey, West Memphis 3. We see it all the time. You can't do that. A psychologist, Tom, said that Lucas had an IQ of 84, a desire to feel important, a feeling of inferiority, and a belief that he could not direct his own actions. He also had schizophrenia. Also, earlier in the investigation, I believe right after he was arrested, they asked him if he had suffered from any mental illnesses, and he said no, which he has, and he had been evaluated at other prisons where he had been arrested, and he had been diagnosed with other various mental illnesses. So this would not be a shock to him, but he had been telling everyone who arrested that he had no mental illnesses. None of that mattered. The jury obviously convicted him and sentenced him to death. He seemed unfazed, maybe even happy. It was said that he had an inherent need to feel important. So that could be why a lot of this is going on. He finally feels important being labeled as one of the most prolific serial killers. But he had made several false confessions. It had come out that they were for sure a lie that he was saying. And he even said he did because the more he told police, the more they seemed to care and pay attention. So he just kept making it up. He's like, they kept giving me all of this attention and wanting to talk to me and telling me how good the things I was saying were. So I just kept making shit up. In 1991, Ottis Toole received 4 more life sentences for the murders of 3 women and a man in Florida between 1980 and 1981. Lucas was charged along with him, but not brought to Florida for prosecution. In 1992, a woman named Phyllis Wilcox hatched a plan to dress up like Becky, the 15-year-old girlfriend that he had and had murdered. Because somehow, no matter how fugly they are, criminals attract weird groupies. I'm looking at you, Tedward Bundy. Guys, listen. If you think you want to date a serial killer while they're in prison, just don't do that. That would be great. Don't get involved in that. They're not prolific, cool, anything. They're definitely not hot. Unless they are Dexter Morgan from the Showtime show Dexter, the only hot serial killer to ever exist. So anyway, he has this groupie. So she dresses up like Becky so that she can be like, look, he didn't murder me. I'm still alive. You can't convict him for my murder if I'm standing right here. So they meet up in prison after she reads about him in a book. What she read about him that caused her to want to meet up with him, I have no idea. There couldn't have been anything great in there. So they talk about various things, including Becky. Lucas apparently claimed that he had seen Becky get into a truck and he had only told the police that he killed her so they wouldn't attempt to implicate her in the murders that he'd committed. So he's actually telling Phyllis that Becky is alive. Lucas also denied killing Kate Rich in orange socks, indicating that the oven in which he supposedly had burned Kate was too small for a woman as fat as she was. He's just adding fat phobia up in here to his rap sheet. And it would not have gotten hot enough to have burned her to ash. He was sure that the authorities found some chicken bones, nothing more, and exaggerated their significance. About orange socks, he claimed that the bruises around her neck did not even fit his hands. He's like, well, that couldn't have been me. So she's believing all of this, and she's like falling in love with him. I have no idea why. It will never make sense to me. Despite the fact that he's disgusting, and also a murderer, and despite the fact that she is married, and she has children and grandchildren. Whatever. So she devises this plan because she's starting to get terrified that he's going to be executed. They go into this whole spiel, her acting like Becky, and him saying like, see, here's Becky, I didn't kill her, I told you. It obviously didn't work. Anyone with two brain cells rubbed together could see like the cracks forming in that plan immediately. So they know he committed 4 murders. His mother, Becky, Kate, and orange socks. Those are like the 4 ones they know he did. However, his conviction and death sentence for orange socks came under fire because technically the only evidence they had was his confession. And they have been able to debunk hundreds of his confessions. Also, they now have some evidence that Lucas was in Jacksonville, Florida when orange socks was murdered. And they were able to prove that he was in Florida based on the check stubs and shit that he had when orange socks was murdered. All of that paperwork was entered into evidence in 1996 at his hearing regarding his death sentence. In 1998, based on a lack of evidence connecting Lucas to the murder and the existence of contradictory evidence, then Texas Governor George W. Bush commuted Lucas's sentence to life, the only man to receive this during Bush's reign, which is wild to me because I think as a governor of Texas, he oversaw over 150 executions, but this is the man he decided to show compassion to. It is alleged that there was not really a downside to this. He was already serving 6 life sentences, so he wasn't really a threat to society. He wasn't ever going to get out and do anything again. And it allowed Bush to get some compassion karma while not really doing any harm to anyone. Because at this point, it was said that, like, it was almost impossible for him to have murdered orange socks. Like, the more they looked at it, the more things just did not line up in a way where this could have possibly happened. While on death row, Lucas became a born-again Christian and spent the last 18 years of his life as a model prisoner, as they always do. He died in Huntsville, Texas prison from natural causes on March 12, 2001, at the age of 64. In 1996, Toole died in prison from cirrhosis of the liver at the age of 49. Other sources will say AIDS was at play. His body went unclaimed and he was buried in the Florida State Prison Cemetery. Toole's big case, which I didn't really get into here, was the last week's case of the murder of Adam Walsh. So go back and listen to that if you're wondering what the hell Ottis Toole was up to while Henry Lee Lucas was doing all this shit. Knows how many people Lucas and Toole were responsible for murdering, and honestly, we never will. Some people guess the 11 he was able to be convicted of. Some experts say it probably realistically is close to 60 or 70 murders. They were just eager to make up stories and became completely unreliable witnesses, which kind of sucks because I bet they did commit more of these murders. It's just impossible to convict them of them because how much they lied about everything else, which kind of sucks. But that is the case of Henry Lee Lucas and Ottis Toole. Mostly Henry Lee Lucas, but I did Ottis Toole last week, kind of. So, yeah, gruesome twosome. They had, I think Henry Lee Lucas was the one who started telling police he had committed over 600 murders. And it was Ottis Toole who was actually like, well, no, we only committed exactly 108 murders. So he's a liar. So the number was never matched up. The number did. They just were instantly making shit up. So let me know what you think. Let me know how many murders you think these people were capable of. I honestly don't know. I do think they probably just made a bunch of stuff up because why not? They liked the attention, but also they are such grimy individuals that I do probably think they just murdered a bunch of random people that could add up to like a very high number. I'm just unsure. It has been so lovely talking to you for the past hour and 20 minutes. of which you only got to hear 42 minutes because Harvey shut the machine off. And now she's just snoozing away, having a great time. So I'm going to get off of here. I'm going to record the Patreon episode that I should have recorded last week. And hopefully, I'm speaking to myself in the future if you're listening to this. Hopefully you listen to the new Patreon episode on Monday. I'm going to put it on Monday. And then I will still do one for you on Friday. It is the week of all weeks, not Thanksgiving. It is the week of the Ohio State-Michigan game. So say your prayers for me. Perhaps we can win for the first time in a few years. Yeah, hopefully I have a great weekend. Hopefully you have a great weekend, but hopefully I have a great weekend for different reasons. Hopefully this all works out for me. If you Black Friday shop, have a fun and safe Black Friday. I have a spreadsheet of Christmas presents that I need to buy with a link of where to buy them. That way I can just click on them once a day and see if any Black Friday deals have been activated. And in doing so, I have saved hundreds of dollars already. Like the other day, I clicked on some random ones and they were all half off. I was like, perfect. And I will see you next week. If you're on the Patreon, I'll see you Friday. Either way, have a great Thanksgiving. I won't see you before Thanksgiving because it's tomorrow. Have a great Thanksgiving, even though it's a terrible holiday and I don't like it. And I will see you Friday for a new bonus app. And if I don't see you Friday, I will see you next Wednesday. All right. Have a great weekend. Bye.